Okay, you're under arrest on suspicion of murder, okay? You do not have to say anything. It may harm your defence if you do not mention when questioned something which you later rely on in court.
This is convicted sex offender Simon Levy being arrested by London's Metropolitan Police for a murder he had committed.
What the hell's going on?
But he was released without charge and went on to kill again.
I think it is one of those cases that it should be a watershed.
Levy, the murderer, could have been stopped at the start of his campaign of escalating sexual violence.
It didn't need to take all of these women for Simon Levy to be finally put in prison.
But 2 women were murdered and 12 others attacked before the police took him off the streets. Simon Levy was first jailed in 2021 for sexually assaulting 2 women 3 years before. He'd encountered one of them on London's underground tube network before following her. The tube is where he would later attack multiple other women. While in this prison in 2022, Levy sexually assaulted a female prison officer. But the Met Police didn't even interview him until months after he'd been freed from jail on licence the following year. And it was 2 more years before he was charged. By then, he'd attacked many more women. The Met's trying to justify its vast delay in investigating the prison assault.
There's some inherent hazard sometimes in getting victims' accounts from victims, and that's not to blame the victim, of course, in this matter, but obviously if it's a serving prison officer, it may have taken us some time. There's obviously very high workloads for officers involved.
She did report it on the same day it happened. There was CCTV of the incident.
Yes, and in fairness, that angle of the inquiry isn't lost on us in terms of its significance to the overall chain of events here.
The Met was responsible for risk managing Levy when he came home from prison to North London. And there was a deeply flawed assessment. Your officers took the decision to downgrade Levy from a high-risk sex offender to a medium-risk sex offender. Do you accept that that was a terrible decision?
We've voluntarily self-referred to the Independent Office of Police Conduct to look into any matters relating to Levy's offender management during that period. So it would be remiss of me to comment on what was right and wrong in that space.
He's one of the most high-risk sex offenders this country's ever seen.
At this point now, obviously we know in hindsight, this man is one of the most dangerous and predatory men that the Met has ever come across.
The Met should have known Levy was a menace. While being risk managed by the force, he was even briefly returned to prison to finish his sentence after breaking his licence conditions by being accused of a sex offence. When free, Levy embarked on a campaign of sex attacks on public transport, using his crudely hidden hand to commit flagrant sexual assaults. This footage is by a woman who Levy's just assaulted. He's about to do the same thing to another woman on the same train. This video was passed to British Transport Police, but Levy wasn't charged for months. British Transport Police told us that delays in its inquiries weren't good enough and were down to incompetence. Levy was repeatedly freed on bail by British Transport Police and then by the courts. The Crown Prosecution Service said it apologised for shortcomings in its attempts to have Levy kept in custody. This woman was among the last of 10 who were assaulted on public transport.
It didn't need to take all of these women for Simon Levy to be finally put in prison. The attacks could have been prevented. What was worse than even the physical assault was finding out afterwards that there's loads more women, and then finding out he's actually out on bail whilst he's done these things, and that he's raped and murdered women.
While carrying out the train assaults, Levy was also prowling London, targeting vulnerable women involved in street sex work. In January 2025, Levy raped a woman in this car park near his home. He left her for dead, having strangled her into unconsciousness. She thought she would die. The Met Police were first told about the rape when they stopped the victim here in Tottenham for allegedly breaching a banning order that prevented her being in the area. She told them that she was on the way to hospital, having recently been violently raped and attacked. but the police proceeded to arrest her and took her into custody. She described Levy's appearance and where he lived, but the force closed the case months later with few inquiries undertaken, having decided the victim was reluctant to engage. Scotland Yard told us it did what it could to progress the inquiry. A national collective for sex workers says their lives are not valued and they're instead criminalised.
Violent men know that if they attack sex workers, they're likely to be able to get away with it. What the police are actually doing in practice is that they're prioritising arresting women rather than actually paying attention to the violence and abuse that women are suffering and trying to find a way to deal with it.
In March 2025, Levy murdered Carmenza Valencia-Trujillo, a beloved grandmother from Colombia. He found her in South London, near where she lived. He killed her in this derelict block of flats. Carmenza was found here on the stairwell of the condemned building. Her body had been here for a day before being found by a member of the public. Simon Levy had made no attempt whatsoever to conceal the murder he had committed.
Simon! You out, sir. Show me your hand a second.
Levy's DNA was on Carmenza.
You have been forensically identified as a suspect in the murder of Carmenza Trujillo.
He was arrested by local officers, but released. There wasn't a full investigation by specialist murder detectives, as the Met did not formally class Carmenza's death as a murder.
So this was treated as an unexpected death under investigation. So it was by no means closed or no further action. It was a death under active forensic and other investigation by the local basic command unit. It was unclear what the exact cause of death was, what actually caused her to pass. And of course the forensic link to Levy was one of many recovered at the time. So it couldn't be conclusively clear that he was indeed involved in that murder.
But you could have done that yourselves. I mean, you had a victim who'd been raped by him and attacked, who had spoken to you and then you had not pursued it in the way you could have done. And you had a murder that you didn't treat as a murder, and the person who murdered her, you even arrested him on suspicion of murder, yet it was never then treated as a murder case. That's just a huge failure.
I think in hindsight now, I think it's easier to make that assessment.
Levy was left free to kill Sheryl Wilkins in summer 2025. He did so in the same car park where he'd raped the woman who survived. He found Sheryl on the street, walking together a short distance, going behind a wall in the car park and disappearing for almost an hour, with Levy emerging after he'd murdered her. Sheryl was found here the next morning by police officers on a regular patrol. As with Carmenza, Levy had made no attempt to hide what he'd done. This was the same area of the car park where Levy had violently raped the woman whose case had been closed by the Met months earlier without a full investigation.
This officer's just going to read something out to you, okay?
The Met finally understood the obvious danger posed by Levy.
You're under arrest on suspicion of murder, okay?
What?
He'd been able to kill 2 women and attack 12 others before finally being stopped.
I think there's a collective system failure which needs to be looked at in terms of the fact that he was successfully investigated by British Transport Police for many of the offences. He was put before a court on 2 occasions. Remand in custody was requested with strident evidence behind it, and yet nevertheless he was released into society to go on to offend and sadly, certainly from that point forward, to commit another murder. So there were opportunities here, I think, to save some of the victims from their fate.
But Sheryl, who was murdered second, she's the last victim in time of all of the victims whose case has come to court. Her life could have been saved.
I think so.
Do you accept that the Met has therefore contributed to Sheryl's death?
I think we have to wait for the outcome of the IOPC inquiry, because otherwise I'm prejudging the actions of the officers involved in his offender management. But certainly I've apologised to Sheryl Wilkins' family, to her mother and her sister, wholeheartedly for any role that we've played in failing to protect her from this man.
The woman assaulted by Levy says there were multiple failures.
I think in this case it hasn't been taken seriously, and presumably in a lot of other cases it hasn't been taken seriously. So if we're just going off this case, then I think they need to take a long, hard look at why this has happened and hopefully learn at least something from it, so it hasn't all been for nothing. I definitely think it's really important I reported what was done to me, because I think there's a massive issue with women not feeling confident or comfortable enough to report things.
The police were supposed to have learned from previous failures to protect women.
I think it is one of those cases that it should be a watershed. It's a terrible case, and we absolutely must expect a huge amount more from our police force and from the criminal justice process. If women are ever going to feel any confidence whatsoever in the system and any sense of safety.
Carmenza and Sheryl were failed by the system. Murdered by a man who should never have been free to harm them.